In this video, we'll discuss the semantic range of the Greek verb katalambano and attempt to select the best meaning for that verb as used in the 5th verse of the 1st chapter of the Gospel of John. I should say at the outset that the process of selecting the appropriate meaning for a particular word in a particular passage is a fairly complex subject, and I only deal with it here in an elementary and introductory fashion. For context, we'll look at the first 5 verses of the 1st chapter of John. I'll read verse 5 using modern Greek pronunciation. Ketaphos endi skatia pheni ke skatia afto u kateleven. We focus our attention on the last word of verse 5, kateleven. This is the aorist active indicative third person singular form of the verb katelemvano. Leon Morris, in his commentary on the Gospel of John, warns us that the word kateleven is not easy to translate. Katelemvano is a compound verb that combines the preposition kata with the verb lamvano. Kata is used as an intensifier. In other words, whatever meaning we give to lamvano, the use of kata usually intensifies that meaning in one way or another. So, for example, if we assign the meaning grasp to lamvano, then katelemvano might mean something like eagerly grasp or grasp with force. From the Bauer, Danker, Arndt, Gingrich lexicon, known as BDAG, BDAG, we list the following possible meanings of the word katelemvano. 1. To make something one's own, win, attain. 2. To gain control of someone through pursuit, catch up with, seize, overtake, come upon. 3. To come upon someone with the implication of surprise, catch. 4. To process information, understand, grasp. For simplicity, we'll just consider these meanings, although scholars have advanced a few others. Now, how do we decide which of these meanings to assign to the word under consideration? We certainly want to avoid the all too frequent mistake of trying to assign each and every meaning to any particular word in a particular passage of Scripture. There can, of course, be times when the author intends a double meaning, but that's the exception. There usually will be a best meaning to be assigned. We also want to avoid assigning meanings based on our own theological or doctrinal bias. The right approach is to try to determine what the author meant in context. Here's a list of things to consider, but keep in mind that context is all important. A, the immediate context. B, how the author uses the word in other passages. C, how other New Testament authors use the word. D, the etymology of the word and how the meaning may have changed over time. The Greek word katelemvano, or some form of it, is used 15 times in the Greek New Testament. See Swanson, Kohlenberger, and Goodrich's exhaustive concordance to the Greek New Testament. John uses the word or some form of it 4 times in his Gospel. John 1:5, John 8:3, John 8:4, and John 12:35. The uses in John 8:3 and 4 do not seem to be helpful, since these verses are not contextually parallel to the passage in question. Note also that the verses in chapter 7, starting with verse 53, going through chapter 8, verse 11, do not appear in the Nestle Aland text. However, John 12:35 may be helpful. John 12:35 speaks of light and darkness. Jesus admonishes his disciples to walk in his light, lest they be overtaken with darkness. This seems to be a somewhat similar context and may give a clue about the meaning of katelemvano in verse 5. Paul uses a subjunctive form of katelemvano in 1 Thessalonians 5:4 in what seems to be a somewhat contextually parallel passage. or parallel context to John 1:5 when he says, "But you, brethren, are not in darkness, that the day would overtake you like a thief." Other translators translate as surprise rather than overtake. It is easy to see how BDAG definitions 3 or 4 may fit the context in 1 Thessalonians 5:4. On the other hand, BDAG definition 4 seems to fit the context when we read verse 10 of chapter 1. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world knew him not. Here one could identify darkness with the world. In other words, one could anthropomorphize or personify darkness and say that the world did not know him or understand or grasp his true mission. In the 3 occurrences in the book of Acts, Luke uses forms of the verb katalambano in the sense to understand or to comprehend. That is definition 4 of BDAG. These passages are in the context of a personal understanding or comprehension of something, and so are not strictly parallel in context to John 1:5, unless we anthropomorphize darkness as mentioned above. Similarly, Paul in Ephesians 3:18 uses katalambano with the meaning of comprehend. The other occurrences of katalambano in the New Testament do not seem to have close enough contextual parallels to be helpful in assigning a meaning to the verb in John 1:5. It is interesting to note that the Net Bible, the New English Translation Bible, interprets katelevan in such a way as to combine both meanings 2 and 4 by translating it as mastered, M-A-S-T-E-R-E-D, mastered. This word may have the double meaning of overcome and understand. This has not been an exhaustive look at the various uses of katalambano, but from this quick survey it appears that the BDAG meaning overcome best fits the context. However, the meaning grasp or understand has much to say for it. On a spiritual note, we observe that although the light, that is Jesus, was not overcome by darkness, we could easily be overcome by darkness unless we keep walking in the light. We should heed the admonition given in Isaiah 2:5. O house of Jacob, come, let us walk in the light of the Lord. In closing, I want to briefly mention, without going into detail, a disagreement among scholars having to do with the punctuation of verses 3 and 4. The Nestle Aland text puts a period after and begins verse 4 with ayeganen. The Textus Receptus in the Greek New Testament, according to the majority text, edited by Hodges and Farstead, in verse 3 with ayeganen. You can see that I used the majority text punctuation in my quotation of the passage in question at the beginning of this video. Keep in mind that the earliest manuscripts had little or no punctuation. So, for example, the New Revised Standard Version reads, "All things came into being through him, and apart from him nothing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people." On the other hand, for example, the New American Standard Bible reads, "All things came into being through him, and apart from him nothing came into being that has come into being. In him was life, and the life was the light of men." Without going into detail on this question of punctuation, I'll just say that for me, the New Revised Standard Version reading doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, because there are other things that have come into being through him other than life. However, I am open to being persuaded by real scholars. In any event, the punctuation of verses 3 and 4 does not affect the assignment of a meaning for katelevan at the end of verse 5. Thank you for watching.